Hey parents, if you've been paying attention to the news, you know that autism has been discussed a lot lately. And we've got an administration right now that's doing what they think they need to do to address it. And because of that, people are talking about autism and what is it? And if my child has it, what do I do about it? And today we are fortunate to have a very special guest with us who is going to help us navigate our way through the topic of autism today. And we're going to introduce her in just a moment. My name is Tim Wright. You're listening to the Wonder of Parenting podcast, a brain science approach to parenting. I am here with Dr. Michael Gurian. Michael, good morning.
Good morning.
And we've got a big announcement today. Oh, that wasn't very big.
Sound effects.
There it is. We are now on YouTube. There has been a worldwide outcry, Michael, for people to watch us actually record this. And as people can now see, we both have faces that only a spouse could love, but they're lined with lots of wisdom. And so we're excited to do that. So if you do ever want to just watch and participate that way, we're at youtube.com/@Wonder of Parenting. So youtube.com/@Wonder of Parenting. And you get a chance to see what we look like, what our guest looks like. And we'd be happy to have you join us there on YouTube. We are brought to you, as always, by Army and Navy Academy. The Army and Navy Academy isn't just a school, it's a transformational experience. As a Gurian Center for Excellence, they use neurobiological research to help boys reach their full potential. Through structured academics, leadership training, and strong mentorship, boys develop confidence and skills that last a lifetime. Without the distraction of personal digital devices during the academic day, they foster deep learning and meaningful connections. Located on the Pacific Ocean in Carlsbad, California, they prepare young men for success in college and beyond. You can learn more at armyandnavyacademy.org. That's armyandnavyacademy.org. Now, as I've mentioned on this podcast before, I've got two grandchildren, ironically, both about the same age, both of them 10, from different families, different parents. Both have been diagnosed as being on the spectrum. And these are some things that sort of as we look back on their 10 years of life, we saw as they were growing up. And so I am particularly invested in our topic for today. And we have a special guest with us today, Dr. Theresa Lyons. And she is the founder of Navigating Autism, and she spells it AWE-tism, autism, which I think is just marvelous. So, Dr. Theresa Lyons, welcome, first of all, to the Wonder of Parenting podcast. And give us just a little bit of background of how you became involved in autism.
Well, thank you for having me here, and congrats on YouTube.
Thank you. Yep.
It's a whole new experience.
It sure is. Yeah.
And so I got involved in autism only because of my daughter. So my life was going in a very different direction. And when she was diagnosed, it completely changed everything. So just a little background on me. I have my PhD in computational chemistry from Yale University. I was in the pharmaceutical industry. I did drug discovery. I also then worked on the marketing side and understood how the business of pharma is actually run. And then I also worked for some nonprofits in the healthcare space, really making sure there's adequate delivery of pharmaceuticals to very far off places that normally don't get them. So my whole career, my academic training was all in healthcare and the pharmaceutical industry. And then when I had my daughter, things weren't developing, and there were some concerns. So her pediatrician, the first time they said there was a concern was around 9 months. And so we then went into the whole process of how do we pretty much rule out everything else? Because the tricky thing, and maybe you have experienced this with an autism diagnosis, is it's based on observation.
Yep.
So there's no test, there's no urine test or blood test or anything like that where you could just take the test, get a piece of paper back and be like, okay, it's autism. It's not done that way. It's all based on observation. So we tried to eliminate so much before we could say, okay, well, it's autism. And It was. So she was diagnosed when she was 3.5 years old.
Wow.
And that is what got me involved in all of this. I certainly would not be involved in autism, I don't think at all, if it wasn't for my daughter.
How old is she now?
She's 15.
15. Okay. Can you let's step back a little bit. How would you, for parents, define to the best of your ability what autism is?
Sure. So autism is when there is communication difficulty and a lot of times perseveration. So there's some kind of repetitiveness that
Mm-hmm.
makes daily living difficult. So that's your general rule of what autism is, and that looks different for just about everyone, right? So you have a spectrum, and the terms that are used now are high functioning and low functioning, although many people don't really prefer that. It's hard to describe. They've also been broken down into levels. So level 3 would be your high needs person with autism, and level 1 would be more like what people think Asperger's. So Asperger's isn't a diagnosis anymore. They took that away and then put it all under autism. So
Okay.
you have these different levels of how someone can function in life, but they're all prohibited in some way through communication and some kind of repetitiveness.
Mm-hmm. Um, Michael, you and I have talked about this a little bit. It seems like, first of all, we're hearing more about autism, which is good. Are we seeing more of it because there is more of it, or because we're more aware of it? Chicken
Well,
egg.
yeah, and of course, Dr. Lyons, Theresa, you're going to have something to say about this. I I'm of the ilk of saying, yeah, there's more of it happening because of more mutations, and those mutations being caused, from fertilizer, from endocrine disruptors, from all the neurotoxins that in the last 30 to 40 years especially have gotten into sperm and egg. And then we have these de novo mutations, and then kids come with so many more of these brain disorders. So I'm of that ilk. I don't know where you are, Theresa. I do think we definitely have more of it, just like we have more of so many of the brain disorders, from anorexia, bulimia, through ADD, ADHD, through even conduct disorder. I just think we have more of all of it now because of that. But let's ask our expert. What do you think?
So I would definitely agree that this is not just a case of autism being better diagnosed, right? Because how autism is diagnosed hasn't changed. That has not
Okay.
changed. We have not developed some new test that is able to isolate, pockets that we weren't able to identify before. The diagnosis way is exactly the same. So you're looking for observations, you're looking for developmental milestones not to be hit, and you're looking for barriers for someone to participate fully in life. That hasn't changed. Our environment most certainly has changed. The amount of chemicals, the amount of pollution, our stress levels, just everything about our life that has that interplay with genetics and environment, that definitely has changed.
So, just a little bit about what we've observed in our two grandchildren. So we have a granddaughter; she's about 10. Language development came to her very late, and we were concerned. But she had this very outgoing personality. She would just chatter away and nonsense. I was a pastor for many years, and so when we would do kids' time in church, she would get up and she would dance when we were singing, no inhibitions at all. And it's almost like overnight she just shut down, and she sort of stopped smiling. Her language development has taken a while. She's a very smart kid, but she has a hard time relating to other kids, reading the room. The noise bothers her. For my grandson, we noticed it early on just in his social interactions with kids, and a lot of moving of his fingers. If you're watching YouTube, he's constantly moving his
Oh,
fingers. Stimming, is that what they call it?
yeah,
Yeah,
self-simulatory behavior.
yeah,
So that's the
uh,
repetitiveness that I
yeah,
was talking
yeah.
about.
And my two grandchildren have both been diagnosed as being on the spectrum, but their symptoms are so very different from each other.
Correct. Yeah, and that's what makes autism seem to be so complex, right? Because it looks different, and what each child needs will likely be different. There might be some overlap. There's definitely some basics to health that would overlap between both of them, but that is where the difficulty comes. So a doctor can't just say, okay, do X, Y, and Z, because you really have to dive deep and understand what are the health issues, what's the chemistry going on, what are the root causes for some of these changes that you've seen, and then really addressing them.
You're listening to the Wonder of Parenting podcast, a brain science approach to parenting. We've got a very special guest with us today, Dr. Theresa Lyons, who has really committed herself to helping parents navigate autism. And we'll give out her website a little bit later. So we're going to be back with her and with Dr. Gurian in just a moment. Again, the Wonder of Parenting podcast. Dr. Theresa Lyons, can you went through this as a parent, trying to figure out what's going on with your daughter. There are parents out there listening right now who maybe have just gotten a diagnosis or who are wondering if their kids might be on the spectrum. From your own personal experience, how did you as a parent navigate that, and how are you navigating it, some 12 years, 13 years later?
Sure. So for parents who are kind of, usually the parent has this gut intuition. So I would say for the parent to follow that, in many ways, I had that same intuition, but I was just like, I hope it's not right. Right? Like that hoping, which we know is it's like hoping a water leak will just stop. Like it's not just going to stop, right? So when you have that intuition that something isn't right, to really follow that, because the only thing that will happen is, again, the way autism is diagnosed is more and more things will be missed. So then that means more time has passed, which means when you start changing things and changing direction, you'll have more to catch up on. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with listening to that intuition and start making different appointments for a diagnosis, because you might be on a wait list for 8 months. So if there is that intuition that something isn't right, certainly start building a team and pursue a diagnosis and really take care of the healthcare needs, because it could be something else, but you really want to be thorough.
It takes an emotional toll though on the parents as well, right? I mean,
Right?
for my daughter, and her child, and then my son and his son, at first you're just, what is this going to mean? And
Yeah.
we're still asking the questions. What is it going to, what are they going to look like as adults?
Right. So the importance, so this is where science, right?
Mhm.
Science comes in. So the latest research in 2023 shows that 37% of kids with autism lose their diagnosis in a few
Hmm.
years, meaning
Interesting.
they're able to participate in school without any, additional supports. So no more speech therapy, no more occupational therapy, no more physical therapy, no more ABA or other different educational approaches. So 37% are able to go on with life and not have any of those barriers there that's associated with autism. So that's the first thing to know.
Hmm.
So you don't want to project the grief and the turmoil of the present moment into like 20 years of your child's life, because that's not necessarily true.
Mhm. Uh, at- so for your daughter, when you went through the process, did you keep her in school? Did you homeschool? What was the process that you went through?
Oh goodness, I did a lot of different things. I do whatever is needed in the moment. So for me, the emotion, just to get back to that
Yeah.
emotional turmoil, it took me, I would say, too long to shift out of all those negative emotions. I had too much concern, and I didn't really have great reliable information to really guide me, right? So it probably took me over a year to find out that certain kids don't retain the autism diagnosis scientifically, right? So my daughter was diagnosed obviously before 2023. There's a whole body of research over the decades that has shown that autism is not necessarily a lifelong diagnosis for everybody. For some, yes, but not for everybody. And so that I wish I had that information sooner, because I wouldn't have spent so much time in that, grieving and the despair and being frustrated and angry and lonely, because it just seems like, oh my goodness, we can't go anywhere. We can't do anything, right? And then you stop going to different family parties and friend parties, and everything just gets so hard, especially when your child's not sleeping, then you're not sleeping, and there's all this stress that's coming at you. So really being able to manage that and to be able to then see clearly is really that first step. So for the parents who just got an autism diagnosis for their child, they are going to have all these different emotions. But the important part is to feel those emotions, but to move through it so that they can start taking action really from a grounded and centered place. Because it took me way too long to get there. But I think that's really important in that first part of the journey, is to experience those emotions, but not to stay in them.
Well, and it's ongoing. I mean, the diagnosis for most people just doesn't go away. At least it doesn't go away quickly. So you're constantly living with it and thinking through, okay, what's the best thing to do, and how do I handle this? And at the same time, to almost have to change your expectations. What might frustrate you from somebody who is what we would call non-autistic, we have to give some leeway to the behaviors of those who have autism, and yet at the same time, we want them to be able to fit into society. And it can be so complicated. How did you navigate some of that?
Oh, how did I navigate that? In many instances, not well. I would love to say, oh, it just came naturally and I just increased my compassion, right? Just turned up that dial. But that's really hard to do when all that stress is coming at parents. So the parental nervous system just really gets pounded with a lot. So I started developing I did several things all at once, right? So it was like, all right, let me go to the science, right? I have a PhD in computational chemistry from Yale. I know how to come up to speed on different therapeutic areas. That's what I did for my career. And so it was about getting that quality information. Okay, so what is it that I should do, right? Like a lot of parents think about that. What should I do? What should I do? You want to use science to guide you. You want to have really good doctors who know the stats of 37% of kids can lose their autism diagnosis and do, right? So if you're working with a doctor who has that understanding, they're going to have different expectations of the child rather than a doctor who's like, yeah, this is just going to get worse, right? That advice from that doctor is going to be very different than the one who's saying, all right, let's really start to understand. Then you can start looking at the symptoms, right? So sleep is usually the first thing that we look at, right? Because sleep is so important for the brain and for detoxing and for growth and for it's a developing child, right? So sleep is really that first part. Okay, are they sleeping? If they're not sleeping, why are they not sleeping? So there's usually 3 reasons. Either they can't fall asleep, they wake up consistently at the same time, or they wake up just randomly all throughout the night. And each of those have different contributing health causes to it, right? So it's always about, let's start using the science, take away the guesswork, right? So one of the first things is vitamin D. What's the vitamin D level, right? A lot of kids who can't sleep, they have really low vitamin D. And if they're not taking a vitamin D supplement, as with anyone, like even myself, if I don't take a vitamin D supplement, my vitamin D levels will probably hover around 20, right? But in functional medicine, optimal vitamin D levels are around 60, right? So there's always this gap of how do we improve the health? So then when a child starts sleeping, right, you figure out what the contributing cause was for the sleep disruption. The child starts sleeping. Right now you've got your brain detoxing at night. You have REM sleep being wet. Like you're starting to go down a very different path. Then the parents start sleeping, right? That means, all right, they can start to process a little of the stress that they've been through, and they start thinking much better. And so then you just start to look at, okay, what is the next symptom that is really holding my child back? Is for someone who's higher functioning, is it focusing in school? Is it having that conversation back and forth?
Yep.
For someone who's on the lower function, maybe it's something like headbanging or picky eating. It could be stomach aches or headaches, but really understanding what are the symptoms that are impacting my child the most, and then addressing them. So it is this constant, okay, focus on this, resolve it, on to the next, focus on that, resolve it, on to the next. And before you know it, then you have more good days than bad days. And then autism, you'll see, will turn into AWETISM, the way I spell it.
That's so helpful. Thank you. And so we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to go there. We're going to talk about the science and ask some questions about what we're hearing lately and what that all means. You're listening to the Wonder of Parenting podcast, a brain science approach to parenting. Tim Wright here with Dr. Michael Gurian and with Dr. Theresa Lyons talking about autism. Back with you in just a moment. Our special guest is Dr. Theresa Lyons. And tell us, before we dive into the science, tell us a little bit about autism, navigating autism, and this website that you've created.
Sure. So we have a website. It's navigatingautism.com. And if parents want to join, they can have guidance with health coaches. They can order different functional medicine tests. We didn't get into, the proper testing to do to really understand health issues, meet others from the community. So we have community pods, and we do accept flexible spending. So we try to make it as easy for parents to join and really understand what is the science particular to their child. So what are the symptoms? How do we do the tests? How do we identify good people to work with? And how do we resolve these things and move on to the next, all while supporting the parents? Because as you mentioned, this is extremely stressful. And just to loop in the science a little bit, parents of kids with autism, when they reach their teen years, have a higher risk of a diagnosis of PTSD from their child with autism and the different challenging behaviors. So it's very real that it's more than just the child that needs the support. It's the entire family. So our Navigating Autism platform supports the entire family, and we make it as accessible as possible. It's $98 a month.
So it's Navigating Autism, as in AWE.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
And when you mentioned TD and whatever it was you said, I think about my other grandchildren and the trauma that they're living with, trying to get on with their lives. And the one with the autism takes a lot of energy, and there can be some resentment there. And I'm sure that your website helps navigate that as well. I do want to talk a bit about the science, because there have been some things lately. We've been hearing from the current Trump administration about causes of autism, from vaccines to Tylenol, even to circumcision. And I've got two people on here who are both into science. And we want to make sure that the science that we're looking at is helpful and is undergirded by science. And so I think I'll start with you, Theresa. Give us sort of some of your impressions of what we're hearing these days, how we assimilate that, what it all means.
Sure. So one of the big announcements that the Trump administration made was that leucovorin is now going to be approved for autism. So just to delve into the science a little bit, leucovorin is prescription vitamin B9. Historically, it's been used in oncology. So when cancer patients are going through therapy, they need to supplement certain vitamins, and vitamin B9 is one of them. Leucovorin is the prescription. So it's not an oncology drug. It's just more commonly used in oncology. It's been around for over 50 years. It's generic. There's no pharmaceutical company making huge amounts of profit off this announcement and off leucovorin being used in autism. So what it does for those with autism is the science shows that 70% of kids with autism have antibodies in their brain. So these antibodies are blocking folate from being utilized, which really impacts a lot, right? So a lot of it is related to speech, but also connection and motor control. So for, what does a parent do with this information? There's been 5 clinical studies, small clinical studies, so 100 kids or less with autism. There were really no reported downside to giving leucovorin. So that's that first positive, where it's like, how harmful could this be? It's vitamin B9. You're going to pee any excess out the next morning, right? So it's not harmful in that sense. And these 5 clinical studies really looked at if the child has these antibodies. So you do a blood test to see if the child has the antibodies. And if they do have the antibody, then that's where huge benefit has been shown when given leucovorin. So you titrate up. You don't want to go too fast. Otherwise, there is hyperactivity that happens, as one could imagine, from a lot of B vitamins. But then speech really just starts to activate. And I've had parents on the platform whose child has gone from non-speaking to speaking 4 languages in a matter of like 6 months or so. Yeah, so it is a huge step forward. The caveat is, and this is where a lot of doctors have been pushing back, they're saying this is not really well studied. So there are 5 clinical trials that have been done all throughout the world, so not just in the US. And typically, the next step would be to do a clinical trial much larger. So maybe 500 patients or 1,000, to really analyze the data. That hasn't been done yet. So some doctors are saying, listen, I don't want to do this at all because this isn't really validated. But it's not as if it hasn't been. So the Trump administration pushed the boundaries in the sense of, let's move this forward because the downside is really small, but the upside, right, is massive.
So does hearing things like Tylenol or circumcision can cause autism? From your perspective, my daughter right away, she just said, man, I took Tylenol when I was pregnant. And so she feels this enormous sense of guilt. And so I sort of say, first of all, is it true? And secondly, is that helpful? So give us what you know.
So circumcision, I don't know any research on that, and that being a contributor factor to autism. So I can't speak to that at all. As far as Tylenol, the whole thing is that when you take Tylenol, your glutathione levels are decreased, right? And moms take Tylenol when they're pregnant. They have to make that decision. If they're in a high fever, what's the best thing to do, right? Because fevers, again, are not beneficial for babies either, right? So it's not a choice between doing something right and doing something wrong. Sometimes in life you have those choices where it's like either one is not really what I want to choose. Like, that is there an option 3? So for moms who did take Tylenol when they were pregnant, releasing that guilt is really important. And again, these are these emotions that parents feel. Parents feel guilty for a whole variety of things, for giving vaccines, or for giving antibiotics for an ear infection, or for taking a trip and the child gets Lyme disease. There's so many ways for us as a parent to feel guilty that the way to look at it is, did I purposely do this? If I had a better option, would I have taken that option? Yes. Did I have that? No. I did the best I could with what I had at that time. And so now I just need to focus on resolving some of this. So that's the way to handle that guilt. It takes some time, and it really takes repetitiveness to the parent who's feeling guilty, and they can start to process out of that, especially when they start to identify other health issues to resolve with their child, and then they can start to see their child improve, right? And
Yeah.
then emotions change. So that's really the approach to have with that.
Yeah. Michael, just quickly, you and I talk quite often about just genetics themselves. Is there a genetic disposition or predisposition in some kids toward this? They carry a gene for autism and then it's triggered by something, or how have you been seeing this?
Well, everything that we see, there's going to be some marker, that exists, but does it get triggered, right? So that it has to get triggered. And one could probably argue that everyone, right, has markers that could potentially get triggered for autism. I think that's probably incorrect, but it's a massive amount of people, I would think. But it's got to get triggered. And so the whole thing with the Tylenol, saying that Tylenol is triggering this, kind of misses the fact that the triggering is probably happening in sperm and egg. It's probably mutations in sperm and egg. I mean, that's probably what's going on. That's much more affected by, like what Theresa said and what I was talking about with the pollutants and all these things that are really affecting our baseline, right? Affecting our reproduction and affecting our cells and genes as we're passing them into kids. So I would say we don't really know, and we do know. Something's got to have something. It's got to come from somewhere. But the issue is the triggering of it.
And the interplay between the genes and the environment. So, for example, there are genes that are related to detoxing, and there can be, two children born, they have the same genetic defect, let's say with detoxing, yet one lives in a room that has no mold and the other one lives in a room that has mold, just for example, right? And so one child would potentially could develop autism because they're not able to detox. So genetically, they have that same predisposition, but then their environment, even in the same house, can be different. So this is where environment and genetics really have that huge interplay, and how it could be so different even for people in the same household.
Yeah. Well, there's so much to this topic, right? And we've just scratched the surface. And Theresa, we're so grateful for you being here, sharing out of your personal experience, some of the things you've learned in your research and study. Give us the website once again, where people can find help if they need it.
Sure. It's navigatingautism.com, and autism is spelled AWETISM.
All right. Navigatingautism.com. And we want to encourage you to go there. Theresa, thank you so very, very much for joining us today. Michael, as always.
Thank you, Theresa.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thanks, Theresa.
We'll be back with you next time. The Wonder Parenting Podcast, a brain science approach to parenting. Have a good day.